Hi, everyone. Welcome to Spark Animation 2021. My name is Marina Antunes, Festival Director, and welcome to this very special Meet the Filmmaker session. Very excited to be here with Ewa Smyk. Ewa, welcome to Spark.
Thank you for having me.
Ewa is actually the director of Homebird, which was the runner-up for the student shorts. So congratulations on the award. I was sitting in on the deliberations, and it was a lot of conversation about a lot of films, and people kept coming back to your project. And I think it's really fascinating because it is a beautiful film. So congratulations. And it's always shocking to me how amazing the student shorts are. Can you talk a little bit about, first off, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're Polish. How did you end up in the UK? Talk a little bit about, yourself before going to school and studying film.
Yeah, so I'm Polish and I moved to the UK in 2013 to study at St. Martin's. I was studying design at that time. And at that school, I made my first animated film called The Deal, which was at festivals in 2015 and 16. And it was a very, very crazy experimental film where I didn't know what I was doing at all while making it. So after making that film and kind of feeling the first taste of animation and what the potential of the medium is, I took some time, obviously trying to find some work, but then I just realized that the best kind of place to start with the animation for real would be to go back to school. And I enrolled for the MA at the National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield in the UK, which is an excellent institution. It takes just a handful of people, well, not a handful, eight to 10 people for each course every year. And the main thing about NFTS is that you get to collaborate with all sorts of talented people from different filmmaking disciplines, such as editing and producing and screenwriting and so on to make some really, really good work. So this is my story.
Wow, but I'm really impressed that you went from design to animation. That's quite the change. But you knew pretty soon after you started that that's what you wanted to do. Then the animation was the right call for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love how complex it is and how, as an animator, you get to kind of decide on so many things. You get to draw your frames, as well as obviously having an impact on the sound design and music and the storytelling. So it's just I feel like it's a more complex creative practice as compared to design or illustration. It just has just more of thinking involved and more decision making about things that you might not have idea at all when you start, but then you kind of just learn how to collaborate, really. So I guess that collaborative side of animation is also something that excites me a lot. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Homebird specifically, because you mentioned your first film was quite experimental, and this one has a very unique, very definitive style, and it feels very personal, the story as well. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, let's start a little bit with the story idea. Where did the concept for the film come from? Because it does feel like a very personal story.
Yeah, well, we started thinking about the story it was a graduation project of the whole team of people from the NFTS, which I directed. And the story kind of at the time when we were thinking about the story, I was in the UK for about 5 years, and it was an especially difficult time because it was 5 years of not really seeing your family much, and maybe coming home for a week or two every year. And this kind of homesickness was just at its peak, especially that NFTS is such a busy school when you don't really get holidays or weekends, that it was just very overwhelming. And also kind of studying at this very prestigious institution, but coming from a completely different discipline without really much animation knowledge, and being kind of the only one in that situation in my kind of directing animation group, I was feeling a lot of kind of insecurities and just, you know, this kind of pressure of having to do a good work, I guess, and just like reach this level that everyone else is representing. So all those feelings of homesickness and also this kind of artistic struggle of finding your own voice and of kind of feeling confident in what you do and what you represent with your art and with yourself was the basis for the story, really.
And what about the style of the film? Because it is a very unique looking film.
Yeah, well, I was very much inspired by some like classic cell animation, but also more experimental cell animation, such as George Schwiesgable works. And I wanted to like make it a little bit of my own by applying my own kind of character design and style and illustration style. So each frame of the film is, every single frame is painted by hand. We had some great assistants and painters on board who were helping with that, because the amount of painting done was really quite crazy. So I kind of, yeah, so going back to the kind of how it started, I just started experimenting with cells and painting and trying to kind of find my own way with this medium, and then trying to come up with some shortcuts, because I knew that it would be impossible to have every single frame of the 10-minute long film painted. So I did have to come up with just some hacks, if you can call them hacks. So when I was animating it, actually, I always kept in the back of my head that ideally, if I could repeat some movements or poses, so I can reuse the cell that I colored later on. That's what I was, that's what I was having in the back of my head when I was animating. So it was, yeah, I had to come up with some solutions.
Well, very crafty. I mean, you have to be when you're working, you know, on your own on a project, like you say, that's 10 minutes long and you're doing it very traditionally. It's very time intensive. Can you talk a little bit about that trial and error period and how you started sort of figuring out what some of those hacks could be? You talk a little bit about, you know, repeating movements. What other things were you kind of using to try to minimize the amount of work involved?
Yeah, so for instance, when it comes to the design, I knew that if I wanted to design every single background or keep it within one space, it would be quite difficult. So we had CG artist involved in the film, and a production designer, and he designed the kind of physical space of her apartment and the office and the exterior of the city and the office building. And she modeled it in 3D. And then with that kind of in Maya, I could sit with the cinematographer who was working on Homebird, and we could, Pep, that was his name, and we could sit together and pick the right angles for, you know, like each shot, making sure that it's showing what we want it to show. And then on the top of those renders, I would animate in 2D. So that was, I guess, maybe first kind of hack. It was just, we just found it easier to design backgrounds just by making them in 3D. However, all the backgrounds in the village, they were meant to feel more like a dream or like an illustration of a memory. So all these are just designed as illustrations from sketches and photographs and just memory. Oh, wow. So that was the first kind of process idea, I guess. And then when it comes to coloring, we had lots of people helping out. So what we were doing is I would print out, I would animate obviously in TV Paint or Photoshop. and we would print out, for instance, each frame of the character movement, and then make sure that, then go through this whole pile and just select the ones that don't repeat, so that the repeats would just go on the side because we don't have to color them twice. Phew. And then we would like distribute this amongst assistants with like a set of paints and Posca pens and cell sheets. And sometimes they would work from home, sometimes in the studio. So we made it kind of a little bit remote sometimes. A lot of people were just like coming to the studio every now and then, just bringing piles of colored cell that we would then shoot. Okay. And then the other thing is that all the characters are actually composited on the top of backgrounds. So the backgrounds weren't colored with the characters every time. They were just colored like 3 times to boil them. And characters were colored separately, but with some sort of like a green screen around, which was also colored, but in green, so that we could then composite those together in After Effects. So it was very techy. I hope the audience doesn't mind.
That's amazing, and that's really an innovative way to make use of new technology to sort of enhance traditional animation, which I think is so fascinating. Did you come up with that kind of on the fly, or was it a little bit of trial and error to get that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just trial and error, and then speaking with people from different departments, and the green screen idea we came up with a student from the VFX department who just kind of said, oh, maybe you should just try that, and that worked really well. So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. Definitely.
I think it's amazing because, you know, we talk about film being a collaborative medium, and animation clearly can be a collaborative medium. There are some artists that work totally independently, and there are others that work together in teams. And though, you know, the film has your name on it and your credit, it clearly was a group effort. And I think it's so amazing that you pulled from all of these different backgrounds and all these different teams to put together this film that clearly looks very traditional, but has all of this amazing new technology mixed into it, which I think is so fascinating. Can you talk a little bit as well about the actual like timeline it took to make the film? So when did you start, and how long did it kind of take to get you to a finished product that you were happy with?
Yeah, it was a really long process. It was longer than we expected it to be fair. Even just working on the story took longer. We were at the point when we were obviously like pitching our projects for a green light, and at that point we kind of knew what the story was, but it wasn't really there yet. We kind of had to work on the story as we were working on the animatic and already doing animation. So it was a little bit like reversed process, a little bit wacky, but yeah, it had to be done. So the story had to be like nailed, I guess, because it was personal and because I wanted it to be quite impactful, and also just yeah, just I wanted it to work. So we took more time than we were supposed to. At the NFTS, you get 1 full year to do those, well, a little bit more than 1 full year to do those graduation films. But at the point of the graduation, we had full film kind of edited and animated in 2D, but not everything was colored. It was probably about 30% colored. So after the graduation, well, maybe a little bit more, but some of it just wasn't shot. But in the actual like project that we showed at the graduation screening, we had maybe about 30% of the film colored, and the rest was just this 2D animation dropped onto the 3D renders, just something that looks really, and with some grain on the top just to look just to make it look a little bit more analog. So after the graduation, there was a lot of work left to do, and unfortunately, like, people kind of you know, started their lives again after school, and they started getting jobs. So A lot of it was just kind of left for a very small group of me and a producer who was helping, Leah, who was helping kind of organize coloring and shooting outside of the school environment, setting up a studio at home, and like sourcing all the materials that were still necessary. And that took pretty much a year, to be fair. It was also the year of lockdowns and pandemic, so it was kind of okay to have that time. But yeah, it was like when you think about coloring and then compositing and then sending it for obviously like to the editor to like put it back together and then to do coloring and sound and so on. It was a little bit over a year after we graduated. So more than 2 years, I would say. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the experience of, you work half of the time, half the film essentially is made pre-pandemic, half the film is made post-pandemic. What were in addition to the fact that you have a much smaller team and, you're probably all working from home, what other challenges were there? Like, and what differences did you experience working in those two different environments?
Well, first of all, the remote work proved to be quite challenging because we had to figure out how to send a large amount of files between each other, being in different countries at that time. Then even just, for instance, one of the last steps was to do coloring, and the colorist, Marco, he was at that time in the UK and I was in Poland. So it took longer than it would have otherwise, because each time he would have to send me a pass done, and then I had to take time to watch it and write some notes, and then it was just so much more difficult than just sitting together in the studio and just doing it like from the same room. The same thing was with the sound design and mix, which we also kind of wanted to have updated so that it matches the new colors and the textures better. That also proved to be equally challenging because of that same process of us being in completely different countries, also with time differences, and then having to like send each other files and notes and making sure that the notes are the right time codes and so I guess that was the main difficulty. And also when you're at school, you have a studio space, you have people that you can see all the time, and you have just more people involved actively. And for a big amount of time, it was, I would have to say it was kind of me coloring in a small room all days of the week for a good few months. And I guess that was maybe a little bit alienating. However, lockdowns were alienating as well. So I guess it wasn't really that big of the difference compared to what other people were experiencing at that time.
Can you talk a little bit about that process of, working independently and by yourself and feeling kind of alienated and in your own little bubble? How do you stay focused and on task when you're doing that, when you're tasked with that much work and that you're working towards something, but it feels so like you feel like you're so alone?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I was just kind of in the zone for a long time, and I really kind of didn't mind it as much. I obviously had not much of a social life or any other fun, but it was kind of, I believed in film a lot, and my partner, who was with me at that time, he was really encouraging me as well. So I think having the support of another person who kind of keeps on telling you to keep going, that meant a lot. But I did really enjoy it, actually, and I didn't mind having to do like 8 to towards the end. The hours were kind of longer because I was really want to get it finished. And I set myself some sort of a deadline at that time. But yeah, it was a weirdly kind of enjoyable time, actually.
I was going to ask a question that I forgot to ask back when we were talking about the painting and how you had a team of painters all working. And one of the things that came to mind was, how do you have all of these different people, they all have slightly different styles and different approaches to how they do the work. And, it needs to look cohesive and have a cohesive, appearance. How do you make sure when, you get all of these cells back that everything looks and feels like right, that everything is good? What's the process for kind of homogenizing the look of everybody's work so it still looks individual but part of the whole?
Well, first of all, after usually if people would come to help, they would do at least one day in the studio. Sometimes some people were actually only working from the studio. Some people were just coming to take the printouts and the materials, and they would work from home. But after this 1-2 days, I would kind of realize which maybe shots may be better for them, or are they better to do more detailed things like character, or would they be better to do more loose things that are in the village? So it was just kind of that. I had to just work out what were the strengths of the people, and then actually I was quite lucky that quite a bunch of them, they just stuck around for a long time. So I didn't really have to get new people in and then train them again and so on. So I actually had a pretty solid team for a good amount of time that were just coming back and carried on working. So that was making it much easier. Yeah, but in general, it was just kind of trying to work out who would be good in which thing. And sometimes if something was really kind of sticking out or really didn't match it, I would maybe gently go through it and to do a little fixes just to make sure that it all feels
part of the whole,
smooth and part of the whole. Yeah.
So the film is out there, it's done, you have this finished piece, it's out in the world. What's next for you?
Well, I'm kind of developing a couple of animation ideas in my own time, but also at this very moment, I'm starting a commission that I'm going to be working on for the next month and a half, which is really exciting. And just looking for opportunities. But I do have a few projects from the NFTS that were either maybe just slightly unfinished, or the idea was there, but I would push it a little bit further, that I want to go back to. And a few other ideas that just came during the last year and this year. So yeah, there's quite I'm not bored. If that makes sense. I have things to do. Yeah.
That's right. Not bored, much to do, always another project. And we're so excited that there are more because, again, we love your work. It's amazing to speak with you. So thank you so much for making the time. Congratulations on Homebird to you and the entire team. And congratulations on the win.
Thanks so much.
That's so amazing. So again, congratulations, Ewa. Thank you so much for making the time. It's been lovely to talk to you.
It's been lovely to talk to you, and yeah, just wanted to kind of say hi to the whole audience, and I hope you enjoy Homebird and all sorts of other films that will be showing at Spark Animation.